Hello, buddy. Alrighty then. Welcome to the Mikestand. Today is, of course, Tuesday, November the 25th, 2025. Of course, we're going to give people a chance to come in before we get started. Hope everybody's having a good day. Friendly reminder to everybody, of course, both on my Rumble and YouTube viewership, if you guys have not already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if um, anything else, if anything that we talk about grabs your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, anyways, as we wait for more people to show up, um, well, let me at least talk about some of what I was watching today. So, had a chance to watch some Warner Brothers Looney Tunes cartoons this afternoon, including, of course, the case of the missing hair, the Warner Brothers classic cartoon in which Bugs Bunny meets up with magician Alabama. With the pun being based on the state name Alabama. Let's see. Also, and probably the first color outing together, Porky Pig and Daffy Duck squared off in My Favorite Duck, in which initially Daffy kept reminding, Daffy was making a pest of himself to Porky, and Porky was just not having it, but he couldn't really do anything at first because apparently it wasn't duck season. Couldn't do any harm to the duck, so Daffy was just taking advantage of it until all of a sudden, oh, it's duck season, so now it just uh and of course saw a little bit more Terry tunes as well. Barnyard WAAC, which you could argue was one of Terry Tunes' ventures into the war propaganda cartooning of the time period, in which they were trying to, in a barnyard setting kind of, making a pitch for women to join the WAC or the WAC, the WAAC, which of course stood for the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps. Basically, it was the women who would get in the army. They wouldn't be involved in the infantry or anything like that, but they'd be involved in like support roles, like they're like in as nurses, kitchen help, what have you, and those men and women who, of course, stayed home during those times would usually be be helping out, with the in the various factories and stuff like that. Let's see now. As we're waiting, and so let's see. So we're coming up on 4 minutes here now. It looks like. So I guess I'll talk about what's on tap for tonight then. So tonight I do have an article. Well, not really an article, but I guess more of a wiki article. As well, let's see. So before there was Mickey Mouse, there was Farmer Alfalfa. Now I'm sure many of you are wondering, well, who in the world is Farmer Alfalfa? Well, you're going to find that out tonight because I'm going to be talking about him. Farmer Alfalfa, at the very basic level, was kind of the big star for Paul Terry before before Mighty Mouse. We're going to look at the history of one of the earliest cartoon stars, going all the way back to 1916 in Farmer Alfalfa. One of Paul Terry's first cartoon character. Long before Mighty Mouse, long before Heckle and Jekyll, long before Candy Goose and Dinky Duck, there was Farmer Alfalfa. So I'm going to introduce everybody to Farmer Alfalfa, look at his history a bit. And of course, we'll get all caught up in the latest. We'll look back to last night's Monday Night Raw, which I did find out was taped last week. So I thought tonight was going to be live, but this is basically the go home Raw before this Saturday's Survivor Series, War Games, all that. We'll look ahead to tonight's NXT TNA AAA cross promotional event, Gold Rush Part 2, which was taped last week as well. As all the shows this week before this Saturday's Survivor Series were taped last week, so they give the superstars a chance to spend time with their families for the holidays. Something that Triple H started since he took over. As Vince McMahon used to have everybody work even the holidays a lot of times. If some of you do remember the first Survivor Series, the first few, I think first 2 or 3 Survivor Series were always on Thanksgiving night as opposed to Sundays. Yeah, at the time when Sunday was really the pay-per-view day of the week. Now you're seeing that some of them are, going on Saturday and even Fridays now. So, anyways, with all that being said, why don't we get into, and then of course we'll wrap things up with this day in each history. So, with all that being said and done, of course. And one last reminder, of course, if you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So now let's get into the subject matter at hand. Mr. Farmer, the farmer himself, Farmer Alfalfa. And of course, this is not to be confused with the Little Rascals character of Alfalfa. This is a totally different character. All right, so let's introduce everybody to Farmer Alfalfa. So who is Farmer Alfalfa? Farmer Alfalfa, also known as Farmer Alfalfa, is an animated cartoon character created by American cartoonist Paul Terry. Basically the original Terry Toon right here. Predating Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll, Gandy Goose and Dinky Duck, the Terry Bears, and the Mighty Heroes. The character first appeared in Down on the Phony Farm in 1915, a short Terry cartoon distributed by the Thanhouser Company. Now, mind you, at that time, back in 1915, they were making cartoons at that time, but in the early days of animation, of course, they were silent cartoons. They were not sound. It was all visual humor. Actually, even before we continue that, let me go over here real quick. And so the in-universe and all this. So, first appearance, Down on the Phony Farm, 1915, created by Paul Terry, voiced by Roy Haley. So once he did Roy Haley. So once they did add sound to the Farmer Alfalfa cartoons, Roy Haley would be the and then his alias is of course Farmer Alfalfa, Farmer Gray, and all alternative names. He's human male farmer. All right. So with all that being said, let's get back to the history here. Next came a series of shorts produced by Terry for Bray Studios, starring with Farmer Alfalfa's Catastrophe, 1960. Bray Studios, owned by J.R. Bray, of course, was part of the early days of the silent film era. Bray would continue to, of course, actually, never mind. Thinking somebody else there. Anyways. After leaving Bray, Terry retained the character, making new shorts for Edison and Paramount over the few years following. Of course, Paramount eventually they would team up with the Fleischer brothers and distribute the Fleischer Studios cartoon, most notably Popeye and Betty Boop, but also Color Classics, among others. And some of the shorts that are developed from characters from the Gulliver's Travels movie of 1939. Let's see. Terry then used farmer alfalfa frequently during the 1920s for his Aesop's film fables series, the character's most prolific period. He basically made him the feature character in Aesop's film fables in the 20s. Again, this is still during the silent era, of course, of films. All right, let me do something here real quick. Let me see if I can stir some interest here. All right, never mind. All right, that's right. I just remembered that. Maybe this goes. Okay, then let me just go. See if we got nobody's coming in yet, so now that I've just done that, let me just go ahead and see if I can stir some interest here. Those who happen to be on that might be interested. All right. So, anyways, all right. So, continuing on then with what I was just reading here. Let's see. By this time, the farmer had been redesigned to allow simplified animation, necessary as fables were released by Path on a weekly basis. Now, of course, when we looked at Terry Toons as a whole, as a studio, the Terry Toons studio as a whole, we came to find out that he did use a lot more simplified techniques, as he was once quoted as saying, "Well, let Walt Disney be the Tiffany's of the animation world. I want to be the Woodwards," which I'm basically guessing basically means that if Walt Disney is kind of the high class animator, you know, if Walt Disney is uptown, then I guess Paul Terry was Main Street, I guess. Anyways, as we continue on here, let's see. The farmer's head and arms could be drawn on a separate cell, um, while the rest of the body. Wow, that must have been something. Head and arms, and then you got this body. You got the body, and then you got the arms and the head all separated. That might have been a little creepy for some people, I guess. Let's see. On a separate cell, while the rest of his body was drawn on another, a technique anticipating the limited animation of television cartoons. Well, when Terry made the transition to sound, so did the farmer. The first publicly released sound cartoon, Dinner Time, which was in 1928, which I think that's just been more realized in recent years. Everybody's thought that Steamboat Willie was the first sound cartoon, but apparently was not the case. It was Dinner Time. Featured Farmer Alfalfa as an irate butcher who had to fend off a pack of hungry hounds. The short failed to garner the amount of public interest that occurred following the release one month later of Walt Disney Steamboat Willie. So Dinner Time was the first, but Steamboat Willie was really the one that kind of just burst the doors open, as it were. So interesting stuff. But considering Farmer Alfalfa is probably, you could consider him like the oldest animated cartoon character, as basically being there since 1915. So that he's 110 years old here. And again, friendly reminder, of course, if you guys haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability as we continue our look at one of the first, probably the first cartoon character ever created, Farmer Alfalfa, on film. Anyways, continue on here. In 1929, Terry left his producer, Amadee J. Van Buren, to open his own studio, Terry Toons. With distribution covered by Educational Pictures, which would eventually become 20th Century Fox, the farmer character was revived in 1930, beginning with French Fried, and continuing until 1937, after which the character would appear only irregularly until 1955, which is true. 1937 was his last regular appearance, but he would pop up here and there over the years throughout the 40s and 50s. I remember he was actually in the first Heckle and Jekyll cartoon as kind of their antagonist, kind of the antagonist in the story. So. Anyways, let's see. Continuing on here. Let's see. For roughly a year, the farmer continued to appear in Van Buren's cartoons. then being made by former Terry associate John Foster and Manny Davis, in parentheses, both of whom would rejoin Terry a few years later. Which is true. By the time we get into the early 40s, John Foster and Manny Davis were helping to bring characters like Gandy Goose, Sourpuss, Dinky Duck, and Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll all to the forefront, all to the viewing public. Since the character was established as his own property, Terry threatened legal action against his former producer, Van Buren, after which the farmer stopped appearing in the Van Buren films. As Terry's studio began to grow and develop, Farmer Alfalfa wore out his welcome and was subsequently all but retired. The farmer never entirely disappeared, however. He was featured as a supporting player in the first two Heckle and Jekyll cartoons, as I just mentioned, in 1946, and he starred in Uranium Blues in 1956, 10 years later. In the early 1950s, the character was unofficially rechristened Farmer Gray, quote unquote, probably by Fred Sales, the host of the daily children's program entitled Junior Frolics, that was broadcast on station WATV in Newark, New Jersey, television station that would become WNET, WNET. Sales certainly named some of the subsidiary characters, in parentheses, presumably previously nameless, such as the donkey Bumpy, the cats Casper and Bad Mike, and mice Marty and Millie. And of course, I believe Farmer Alfalfa would also, his cartoons would also come back to TV, with like some of Terry Toon's shows, like Barker Bill's cartoon show. In the Terry Toons comics of the mid-50s, now as we talked about before on here with the connection between cartoons and comics, you did see companies like Dell and eventually Gold Key, Charlton, and a few others. They would make it a practice to take some of these properties from each other and make, so those characters that started out as cartoons would get a comic adaptation, and vice versa. Sometimes comic characters, would get, cartoon adaptations. Most notably from early days, Popeye and Superman in particular. Most notably there. From the comic to cartoon, and then from cartoon to comic, Farmer Alfalfa, of course, being one of them, along with many others. So there's always an interesting interplay between cartoons and comics, to say the least. Let's see now. So okay. In the Terry Toons comics of the mid-1950s, the character was briefly rechristened Farmer Gray, presumably in an effort to capitalize on the popularity of Junior Frolics, quote unquote, through television. But the renaming in the comics did not last. Its use was inconsistent, in parentheses, sometimes changing from month to month, on parentheses. And by the late 1950s, the original character name had returned to use permanently in the Terry Toons comics. In the fall of 1958, the white-bearded protagonist, starred in the syndicated television program Farmer Alfalfa and his Terry Toon pals. a compilation of earlier black and white Terry shorts. Now, of course, a lot of the companies were doing this, have done this over the years from, throughout television history. That was one of the earlier ones. Obviously, Paramount did that with the Harvey Toons show. Woody Woodpecker for Walter Lantz and Universal. But of course, we've seen Bugs Bunny and Friends from Warner Brothers. The Tom and Jerry show from MGM. So all the companies were more or less doing it for the most part. Disney did it as well. So so let's see. Continuing on here. Let's see. Oh yeah. Although no longer for sale in the mainstream television market, most of the early cartoons, the silent ones in particular, have surfaced on public domain compilations, including most notably Video Yesteryear's Cartoons Knowledge, Cartoonal Knowledge, the VHS series from the 1980s. Also, some of these cartoons you can find on YouTube too. You can find a lot of the Farmer Alfalfa stuff, I believe, on YouTube as well. If you guys want to ever check those out. In 2024, the life and times of Farmer Al debuted on HBO Max with an introduction hosted by Leonard Maltin, marking the first time his cartoons had been on television since the 1950s. Apparently, Farmer Alfalfa was going to have a cameo appearance in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, 1988, alongside other Terry Toons characters such as Mighty Mouse, Heckle and Jekyll, and others, but reportedly rights to the character could not be obtained in time. Alrighty then. So that's all for the history of Farmer Alfalfa. Let's see, 27 minutes. So we did carry that to. So now we're gonna of course get ready to move on. I think let's see. Well, let me see if I can find maybe a shorty to kind of. I think we got time here to pick up on a quickie article. Let me see. I think there was one I saw that it's going to be a pretty quick. Yeah, this one right here. All right, so here we go. I'm gonna do one more article here before we get into the wrestling wrap up. So here's something as we are kind of in the holiday season, as we've learned, a lot of people are like doing already doing a lot of the Christmas stuff. Richard Williams had 2 conditions for A Christmas Carol. Now, there have been many adaptations of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol before. We've seen them in cartoons in particular with like a Flintstone Christmas Carol, a Looney Tunes Christmas Carol, Mickey Mouse Christmas Carol, you name it. Just about every major cartoon franchise has had an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. And the story itself has even been done in animation as well. So, spooky Christmas movies, bah humbug. Article published today, 2/26, by Need TV Toon staff. Oh yeah, this is from the 1971 one. So let's get into this then. Let's check this little piece of history out. And of course, I can find the cursor. And again, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. All right, so let's get into this. So in 1971, Chuck Jones approached Richard Williams to create an animated television special adaptation of A Christmas Carol. And as we know, of course, Chuck Jones a few years prior did How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Theodore Geisel. So, as we learned recently here. Before he won 2 Academy Awards for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Williams was an up-and-coming animator who had mostly animated intro sequences for films, as well as directed animated shorts and commercials. But Jones had been impressed with Williams' work on The Charge of the Light Brigade, a 1968 live-action film directed by Tony Richardson. Williams' animated sequence changes were designed to look like 19th century Punch magazine cartoons. And many of Williams' animations were drawn directly from the magazine sketches. Pretty impressive. So that scene right there is from the 1971 A Christmas Carol. And I saw that, I think, for the first time last year. That was a pretty interesting, especially for that time period. Very gritty look to it in terms of the animation. So if there are any artists in the chat who'd like to chime in on that, feel free to do so. Okay, so fun fact about Punch magazine. They created the word cartoon in 1843 when they needed a word to describe their editorial sketches that were satirical in nature, especially their cartoons by John Leech, who drew humorous parody comics of modern news and culture. John Leech's work was enjoyed by Charles Dickens, who needed an illustrator for his upcoming novels. A Christmas Carol, Leech drew four plates for A Christmas Carol, including illustrations of Jacob Marley's Ghost, The Ghost of Christmas Present, The Ghost of Christmas Past, Christmas Yet to Come, and Fezziwig's Ball, the last of which serves as the frontispiece of the book. Jones saw Williams' work in Light Brigade and realized that if Williams could replicate Punch's cartoons, then he was the right animator to bring Leech's illustrations to life. So that 1971 film, a lot of the influence was from John Leech from back in the 1800s there. So that was pretty, sounds pretty cool. Let's see. Williams set 2 conditions first. Set 2 conditions. First, that the animation resembled Leech's original illustrations. And second, that the story could be dark and scary to focus on the ghostly elements. So I guess they were looking to make an animation that wasn't necessarily completely kid friendly, as it were, but a little darker. To this day, the surrealism and haunting visuals of what keep fans coming back to this film In an interview with Judy Hamilton, Williams recalled the discussion with Jones, saying, quote, I called up Chuck Jones and said, smaller quote, hey, look, this is frightening. It isn't a sloppy, sentimental thing. It's about Ghost. Do you really want it? Unquote. Jones replied, quote, give it Dickens, unquote. And Williams jumped right into research, finding every old copy of A Christmas Carol in used bookstores and museums around London to find the original Leech sketches to begin replicating them. The project took 9 months and over 30,000 drawings, but the result was a hit Christmas movie. 30,000 drawings! Wow! That would seem like quite an unfathomable amount of drawings there. Wowee. So, anyways, the movie was considered such high quality that it was also released theatrically, which meant it was eligible for the Oscars. So they released them. So I'm guessing they released the movie both in theaters and on television. I guess from what we're learning here, I guess Jones was initially just intending to release this on television, but it ended up being so good that they decided to give it a theater run as well. Jones submitted it for the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film, and it won. Williams recalled that someone at ABC told him, quote, make us a classic we can run for 20 years, unquote. And now, 50 years later, it's running for the first time on MeTV Tunes for Tis the Season for Tunes. We will be showing the classic holiday film on November 29th, that's this Saturday, at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 Central, 3 Pacific, and December 14th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 Central, 4:30 Pacific, and on Christmas Day at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 Central, 7 a.m. Pacific. Watch MeTV Tunes, 'Tis the Season for Tunes, on MeTV Tunes, Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 Central, 3 Pacific, and Sundays at 5 Eastern, 4 Central, 2 Pacific. Alrighty then, so we got through a couple of good articles tonight. Very interesting articles there on some animation history there. I do need to step away for a moment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the music on while I'm gone. And when I get back, we'll get into the wrestling wrap-up. Oops. Yeah, wrestling wrap-up. Start to bring things down a bit here. I do need to step away. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So hopefully everybody's having a good time. Again, a friendly reminder here, of course, if you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here we talk about grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. With that all being said, now let's move on to the wrestling wrap up. You know, um, as of course we're now heading into so last night was the go home Raw before before this before this Saturday's Survivor Series Survivor Series event. Last night, coming from the Paycom Center in Oklahoma City Center. Apparently, here they did say that it was actually live. So, but oh wait, actually, it was apparently live, supposedly live. I guess some people were saying that was. But on last night's Monday Night Raw from the Paycom Center in Oklahoma City, with Wade Barrett and Joe Tessitore on commentary in the tournament to determine John Cena's final opponent. In the tournament to all right, so in the tournament to determine John Cena's final opponent for the let me just fix something here. That helps a little bit. All right, so anyways. All right, so getting ready to move here then. So the opening match in a quarterfinal match for the last time is now tournament to determine who will face John Cena in John Cena's final match in a few weeks on Saturday night's main event. Gunther defeated Carmelo Hayes in 17 minutes 40. Then the second match of the evening saw Rey Mysterio Jr. defeat JD McDonough of the Judgment Day with Finn Balor in his corner. Then the other quarterfinal match on the show, Solo Sikoa with Tala Tonga defeated Penta by referee's decision when Penta separated his shoulder during the match. He wanted them to just reset the shoulder and let him finish the match, but they said no. And it wasn't gonna but he did get hurt. And in a War Games Advantage tag team match, representing Team Vision, Logan Paul and Drew McIntyre defeated the Usos to gain the advantage for their team. Team Vision having the advantage of basically going first. So, all right. So that was all that happened on last night's Monday Night Raw. So now let's look ahead to, of course, tonight's look ahead to tonight's NXT, the co-promotional event, the part 2 of the Gold Rush event that was taped last week for NXT, co-promotion of NXT TNA and AAA, Lucha Libre AAA Worldwide, with Booker T, Peter Rosenberg, and Vic Joseph on commentary on the CW. It was taped last week for broadcast today. The opening match will see the Evolve title on the line as current Evolve champion Jackson Drake, with Brad Braylon and Ricky Smokes in his corner, will be taking on Sean Legacy. Kendall Gray with Ren Sinclair in her corner will be defending the Evolve Women's title against Lainey Reed of the Fatal Attraction faction. In an Iron Survivor Challenge qualifying match, Trick Williams, former NXT and TNA World Champion, will take on Miles Bourne. In a triple threat match of the TNA Knockouts World title, Kalani Jordan will be defending the title against former three-time Knockouts champion Jordan Grace and Lei Ying Lee. In a match to crown the new Women's Speed Champion, the finals match tournament for the vacant title that was vacated by Sol Ruca after she got injured. Fallon Henley with JT Jane and Lainey Reed in her corner will be taking on Zarya. All right, so that's all we got for the wrestling wrap up. So, with all that being said, why don't we now go ahead and start to wrap things up? Today is of course Tuesday, November the 25th, 2025. So let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. History! So 1975, 85, 85, 75, 85, let's see, 2015, and in 1985. Alrighty then. So with all that being said, now let's go ahead and so first off, let's see. Went ahead back 50 years ago, as on this date 50 years ago today, back in 1975. The 30th issue of Yogi Bear from Charlton Con. As I talked to you guys before, of course, some of these companies like Charlton, Dell, Gold Key would oftentimes do comic book adaptations of other properties. We talked, and let's see, it looks like it had something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories in this book. The story was a total count. It was sold for 25 cents, 32 pages, including Big Boo Boo and Little Yogi. Right in the Kisser. Yogi strikes again. Snap. The day Yogi refused food. That's kind of hard to believe. And a deep problem. So 1975, on this date, 1975, the 30th issue of Yogi Bear from Charlton Comics went on sale on this date back in 1975. Alrighty then. So now, as we get ready to move on to the next piece in each history, and on this next day, on this next piece in each history, we move ahead to the year 1985, as on this date in 1985, the incident known in professional wrestling circles as the original screw job in comparison to the later Montreal Screwjob in 1997, happened on this date back in 40 years ago today. As Fabulous Moolah wins the WWF Women's title from Wendy Richter in New York City, in parentheses, Moolah wrestled the match as a masked spider, then gets unmasked by Richter after the referee delivers a fast count against Richter. Now, I believe there was some, at this point in time, Wendy Richter was riding high on the rock and wrestling combination there, right? She had won the women's title at WrestleMania with Cyndi Lauper in her corner. You know, in essence, at the time, what they initially were thought of as ending up trying to retire Fabulous Moolah. But I think some issues came up between Wendy Richter and Vince McMahon, and led into a whole mess where, basically, McMahon wanted the title off Richter and decided to bring Moolah back to get the title off Richter. So that's all that pretty much happened there in 1985 on that day. So 40 years ago today, the original screw job happened, where the Fabulous Moolah regained the WWE, at the time, the WWF Women's Championship from Wendy Richter. All right, so anyways, as we get ready to move on now to the next match here, or to the next, well, I'll tell you something. 1985 is just so nice that we're gonna hit it twice. As also on this date in 1985, as soon as I pull it up here. All right. On this date in the year 1985, Kitty Films' What's Michael was released on. So, the OVA, the Kitty Films OVA, What's Michael, was released on this date back in 1985 as well, 40 years ago today. So let's learn a little bit more about What's Michael here. So What's Michael is a Japanese manga series created by Makoto Kobayashi in 1984. Again, its serialization in Weekly Morning magazine. The manga shows Michael, an orange American short-haired tabby cat, his feline friends, and other domesticated pets in a series of humorous episodes. Michael is not a specific cat, but rather a feline version of the everyman, as he appeared in drastically different settings across chapters. He's a normal cat in some chapters with different owners in different chapters, parentheses, and an anthropomorphic cat in others, and he even dies in some chapters. Let's see. The manga was adapted into two OVA films in 1985 and 1986 by Kitty Films. Now, Kitty Films, as I understand it, is known for doing a bit more mature material. Like, I know that they were the ones who did the animated adaptation of, like, Maison Koku, which, of course, not super, storyline wise, it was adult, but still it was released and it was dubbed in English by Blue Water. But Kitty Films, is, from what I understand, is known a little bit more for doing some of the more mature anime out there. And a 45-episode TV series produced in France by Deke, although the writing and animation are still done in Japan. All right, so On this date, 40 years ago today, though, the OVA film, Kitty Films OVA film, What's Michael, was released by Kitty Films on this date 40 years ago. And finally, we move ahead to the year 2015. And on this date in the year 2015, and I get there. See, produced by Spiffy Pictures and WTTW Chicago, and premiering on PBS Kids, Nature Cat premiered on this date back in 2015. So 10 years ago today, the PBS series Nature Cat premiered on PBS Kids on this date back in 2015. Nature Cat is an educational animated children's television series that aired from November 25th, 2015 to January 2nd, 2024. So 9 years there, 9 seasons. On PBS Kids. And is aimed at children aged 3 to 5, or 3 to 8, rather. The series follows the adventures of 4 main characters: Nature Cat, Hal the dog, Squeaks the mouse, and Daisy the bunny. The show has been nominated for a Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Writing in an Animated Program. The series' debut in November achieved nearly 3.7 million viewers, and by March, it had achieved 69 million video streams across online platforms. So there you go. So 10 years ago today, premiering on PBS Kids was the educational animated children's television series Nature Cat. Alrighty then, so that's all I got for you guys tonight. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. Of course, once again, let me just give you another reminder here of some programming notes for. So we'll be back here tomorrow with more Niche News, of course. Tomorrow will be the last day for this week we'll be on. As you guys know, I usually do take Thanksgiving and Black Friday off. Give you all a chance to spend time with your family. So tomorrow will probably be we'll be looking back to tonight's NXT episode, looking ahead to tomorrow night's Dynamite, which will be showcasing their Thanksgiving specials, and we'll probably be, we'll also be going over what to expect on, see what to possibly expect on Impact and Ring of Honor, as well as looking ahead to this Saturday's Survivor Series. So with all, well, let's see. So, and of course, we'll be back here on Sunday with Rick Piper from Cross Comics as my co-host. We'll be looking at comics that went on sale in July of 1940. This week we'll be focusing in on Ace magazines. Don't know which stories we'll be looking at yet, but I'll know soon enough. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. And I hope you all enjoyed the show. And I will see you all back here tomorrow. Bye.